What's up guys, Houndish here, and today I wanted to jump in and give some thoughts on the Warmind expansion and Season 3. A lot of folks have asked me, what do you think of the DLC? So I figured now is a decent time to start talking about it. We've seen the bulk of the content, we've kind of got the gist. We know that there is more stuff to come, there will be more seasonal events and things like that, which is awesome. But on the most part, I think we can talk about a lot of the content that we've just received. I should mention though, this is just my opinion guys, I don't want to force this on anybody else. Absolutely, you should let me know what you guys think down in the comment section. I basically have a list in front of me. I want to spill some thoughts, kind of tell you guys exactly how I feel, talk about where D2 is right now, and the direction that the game is hopefully going to continue to go in. So let's jump straight into it. I actually want to start by talking about some of the progression stuff and the endgame side of things. I am going to try and talk about pretty much everything in the expansion, but one element that is kind of big for the game in general would be the adjustments to power leveling. So now it does take quite a bit longer, as we've seen. On top of this though, with the way that activity scaling has been developed, that power level is quite a bit more influential than it was before. On the most part, I think it's really positive that the game requires that investment now to actually level up, and also feeling that that power level is going to be more influential throughout the game is something that the game has really needed. There are a few caveats and things that I want to mention there in a moment. I'll talk about some other endgame activities, but on the most part, I feel like the power leveling changes have been really positive for the game. I look forward to getting high power drops, I look forward to leveling up, and I haven't quite felt that personally in D2 up until now. Before I talk about activities though, I should talk about the space that we've got on Mars. Of course, quite a few of the activities and things actually take place here, but I gotta say, Mars I think is a really nice space. It isn't absolutely huge, but I would say with Mars, it's kind of a quality over quantity type thing. Pretty much anywhere that you go in the new space, you can go for a reason, there is something to collect, there is a quest that takes you there. It just feels like a much more complete space that you can kind of relate to. There are of course the two different landing zones. I personally like the theme as well, it's probably pretty similar to Titan in terms of size. Maybe it's pure nostalgia from D1 or something, but it's really nice to have the space on Mars there again. The fact that they've actually packed collectibles into this space, the various different fragments that you get for different quests that have rewards and everything like that, that is really important. I always thought it was kind of criminal that there wasn't more of that when D2 launched. So it was really nice to start and see that actually come into play again. Of course, as well as this, they've utilized the space quite a bit with some of the quests. So on the whole, it feels like Mars is a pretty purposeful location. And I'd also just briefly mention, the quests. We've got Sleeper Simulant, Polaris Lance, which is happening over a number of weeks. There was the sword, and there are various other pursuits. I am so glad that Bungie have finally put more of this stuff in the game. It has been desperately needed. But of course, also on Mars is the Escalation Protocol. And before I get into my real thoughts about it, the concept right there to have Escalation Protocol in these spaces where you also have all of these other pursuits and things to do, I think it's really cool and they've done a very good job of it. However, I do have some complaints about Escalation Protocol, and they really stem from the fact that I think Bungie kind of sold this expansion in a somewhat significant way around Escalation Protocol, and right now I feel like a lot of players are kind of confused or maybe even turned off a little bit to Escalation Protocol because it's so difficult to do. This is not me complaining about it being difficult. I absolutely believe that we should have difficult activities, at the current difficulty of Escalation Protocol in the game. At the same time though, the fact that there aren't different difficulties available for Escalation Protocol, I think is quite frustrating to players because there's no kind of door into the event. I think a lot of people right now just simply feel locked out of it, because very rarely do you really go into the space and see an entire bunch of people doing Escalation Protocol that are realistically going to have a chance at actually achieving it. So overall, what I'm saying is that I feel like there should be a way into this new activity at a lower level that teams of 3 could maybe complete. It doesn't have to have the best rewards. The best rewards should be locked behind the hardest version, but perhaps it would have just helped progression and aspiration for the general player base a little bit. However, at the upper end, with my clan and stuff, we've had 9-player lobbies in Escalation Protocol. It is a blast to play. It's really challenging. Having so many people in the space and so many different things going off, it's really, really cool. I genuinely have had a bunch of fun with Escalation Protocol, and I also have to say that it has some of the coolest rewards in D2 so far. The new weapons that you can get, some of the bonuses on those are really strong. They're unique bonuses tied to that activity as well. We finally have some cool legendary loot to go after, and I'll have more to talk about on that front in a moment. But that does kind of lead me onto the new raid. It's very, very difficult. I don't think that's necessarily a problem. This is one of those activities which really should be pretty challenging to complete. I just don't think it's rewarding enough. You know, having a raid lair, especially one like they've crafted this time around, there are a few more encounters. It's quite a bit grander than Eater of Worlds was. And then you've got 2 new weapons, a new armor set, which feels like a reskinned version of the last raid lair's armor set. The loot incentive just isn't there at the moment. I think the Escalation Protocol weapons, having those unique perks, is a perfect example of how legendary raid weapons should look. I think also we need armor perks, man. As well as the cosmetic issue, we need more stats and reasons to equip armor and chase different armor sets down. That's also an issue for the raid, but at the moment the loot tables are extremely lackluster. That would be my biggest complaint about all of the raids in D2 so far, especially the 2 raid lairs though. They did throw in an exotic emote for the raid lair, which is really cool. It's a great idea. Finally we're getting more stuff like that, but there is way more stuff to be done. Now though, you PvP players are probably fed up of me talking about raids and all of that stuff. Of course, we have the new Crucible Rankings. I should say, I'm not really talking about Crucible right now, you know, the sandbox, the matchmaking, or the way that it plays in general. I'm talking about ranked play. Of course, there is more stuff which is needed for the Crucible, but actually having these rankings in there, having weapons and different rewards to chase at different ranks, is exactly the kind of progression that we've always needed in D2 PvP. Personally, I've got to be honest about it, I haven't played a ton of ranked play. I haven't been into competitive at all because I've been focusing on video stuff and more of the PvE side of the game. But I've done a little bit of the quick play version. It is really nice just to see a little bit of progress there. Of course, I know that there are various rewards coming up. There are some weapons in the quick play version as well. Then, of course, in the comp playlist, you have the Redrix's Claymore, which is an absolute beast. And there are some people starting to obtain those. What we've got here, guys, is the beginning of a real PvP endgame. I think there is more that can be done, but we've kind of got the foundations going into place. I'm very pleased to see the Crucible Rankings in place. I wouldn't really want to criticize them that much. I think it can be built upon. I think it can have more rewards. It can have more layers. But outside of that, it really comes down to the rest of the Crucible and the sandbox and things like that to change. That's where Bungie are going to have to put in more effort to get things right. The only thing I would say about Crucible Rankings now is that we need something for the PvE players that is similar to that. You know, I would love to see a proper PvE ranking system where you can get, you know, rewards for completing particular challenges inside of raids, for clearing Escalation Protocol, Nightfalls. You could even connect guided games and various other PvE pursuits into some kind of ranking system. For now, we do have, you know, the additional vendor items, getting the exotic ship at rank 50 from the Vanguard. That stuff is fantastic. I just think they need to build a fleshed out PvE ranking system more like the PvP one. There are a couple of other sandbox / progression things to talk about. Of course, we have Masterwork Exotics, and these are actually really huge for the game in my opinion. The first thing I would say about them is that it's an actual innovation, which is really positive for Destiny 2. So of course we had exotics in D1, we never had exotic masterworks, so the idea that you can actually upgrade your weapon, not purely unlock the base perks, but unlock something really special for the weapon, that is a fantastic piece of progression right there. At some point, you know, a couple of months ago, I imagined myself dumping so many masterwork cores into an exotic or something, and when Bungie said, you know, you'll have to hunt these down, then complete objectives to get them, that on its own is fantastic. Then of course you have the sandbox element where you're adding new perks or stats to the weapon, and some of these are really impressive. You know, there are various popular ones going about right now. You've got things like the Crimson getting the range buff, Darcy with its stability, you know, of course we also have the exotic buffs in general, hunting down a full auto vigilance wing, waiting to get the Graviton Lance one when the faction rally rolls around. You know, there's even a bit of excitement in the player base for stuff like that. Players want those events to come around. So on the whole, I really can't criticize anything they've done with the exotic masterwork system. I would like to see them do something with the armor as well. As I've said before, there's plenty more work to be done. And on top of that, I'd reiterate that seeing those gear perks, the weapon perks on the Escalation Protocol weapons, really speaks to how much more exciting Bungie could be making other loot in the game. Raid and Trials gear would be the #1 things I would look at next in terms of improving. Maybe I should list a couple of things that I think still need work. So of course there is the randomization of perks on weapons. We really need to see that in the game. You know, if you imagine the current endgame systems and the improvements that we've seen in Warmind, and then having more randomization of stats, bonuses on weapons, and a mod system that's actually intriguing, then we really could be going places. That is stuff that they need to nail down for September. On top of this, please make sure there are armor perks in the game. Daniel from Bungie, who did quite a lot of progression stuff on Warmind, did actually mention at one point they were working towards trying to get perks on the armor for Escalation Protocol stuff. So the fact that they were doing that does suggest hopefully that we're going to see that in the future for the entire game, and 100% we need to see it. As I mentioned before, even more progression, maybe a PvE ranking system, and various levels for different activities to create more aspiration and a kind of ladder or climb effect for players. Heroic strikes and strike specific loot, not just Nightfall specific loot. I think that needs to be on the cards. We've got more modifiers now. I think they need to look at that difficulty, make sure that those strikes are fun to play through. Personally, when I do a Nightfall, I expect it to be difficult. When I do a heroic strike, you know, I can't run around like an idiot, but I also don't want to be sweating feeling like it's like a Nightfall. Of course, we're under leveled, so I don't want to complain about it too much just yet, but otherwise we've got other quality of life improvements, PvP in particular. There are quite a few things to look at. 6v6, you know, competitive changes and the future of that stuff, as well as weapon slot changes. It still feels like a lot of stuff is on the table, guys, but I genuinely think Bungie have taken solid steps in the right direction. To mention the story, for those who are kind of interested, I thought it was very short. Obviously, it's only a few missions. Feels pretty typical of Destiny in terms of its storytelling and the structure and the format of the campaign side of things. As always, there's some kind of bizarre lore continuity going on, but I do have to say I preferred the darker tone in general versus something like Osiris. Really, they touched on a lot of cool, kind of very big stuff in terms of the story of Destiny, but they did it all very briefly. I'd always like to see more in the campaign side of things, but I do think the additional questification around Mars, you know, the memory fragments, even the quest for the exotic sword and how that links to Elsie Bray. Despite the flaws, I do feel like they made the story feel more exciting, more mysterious in this expansion. My personal favorite moment was the final cutscene after the very last mission, that kind of Rasputin reveal. I thought that was really, really cool. That's more of a production thing than it is a story thing though. But then for Season 3, of course, we will have Faction Rallies and Iron Banner. We don't know too much about how they're going to work. We do know there are a few more items for things like the Faction Rallies, some exotic emotes, was it? Or exotic ornaments, that's the one. So hopefully they can do some good stuff there and make those more interesting. But guys, that's going to round up my thoughts really. I think they've taken great steps in the right direction. There's more work to do. There are flaws in some of the content that they've made here. But I think as long as Bungie think about all different types of players and making sure that there is a really nice kind of ladder of progression for players, then the content coming down the road in September could be pretty awesome. But that's just my thoughts, guys. Let me know what you think. Were you impressed by any of the content in Warmind? I will be 100% honest, guys. I'm more about, you know, what are the improvements? Are we going in a direction that is positive for the game? That's kind of my main focus, but everybody thinks about things differently, so let me know your thoughts below. If you've enjoyed the video though, a like is very much appreciated. If not, then a dislike is cool, I guess. But if you want to see more D2 content, then feel free to hit subscribe. I do cover pretty much everything Destiny 2 here on the channel. But for now, I appreciate you guys watching. Whatever you do, have an awesome day.